Hello and welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42 here talking about tonight's slate. And we got a nice big slate of action here for a Saturday, which we haven't seen in at least a few weeks, maybe around a month since we've seen a big full slate like this on a Saturday. Usually we've got that middle slate with 4, 5, 6 games during the day, but not the case. Today, just 2 games during the day. So we're going to start off here, of course, talking about starting pitchers, and it's a mess at the top. I mean, I won't say a mess. It's going to be a tough decision between a few guys. Chris Archer, for me, at Texas, a team that hits right-handed pitching very well. Obviously, the heat going to be an issue there, as it is most nights. So Chris Archer, I love him tonight, but GPP only option for me at his price tag of $11,200. The guys I'm looking at paying for in cash games are Jake Arrieta and Johnny Cueto. Figure tiebreaker there probably being the fact that the Angels have been absolutely terrible recently. Johnny Cueto coming off that incredible performance against Detroit in his first home game since going over to Kansas City. 8 Ks, only 4 hits, no walks in a complete game, shutouts. Now he gets an Angels team that's really, really struggling. So I think he's in a great spot today at 10-8. Jake Arrieta, 11-6, a little bit more expensive. Going against a White Sox team that you don't like that he's pitching against them at U.S. Cellular, but you do love the fact that he's been one of the better pitchers in all of baseball once again. 26.2% strikeout rate, 51.3% ground ball rate. Doesn't give up much hard contact at all, 23.1%. One of the better rates of the guys who are qualified this season. So you got to like Jake Arrieta here. Those are my 2 favorite options up top. Other options I'm considering, John Lackey in a fine spot against a Miami team that's just a bad offense right now. And Lackey, one of those guys that rarely puts up those huge performances. In fact, he's been pretty pedestrian over his last few, but usually a guy's going to get you, DraftKings-wise, your 15 to 25 points. Should have no issue with that today against a Miami team that's really lacking in power. Another guy I really like is Jimmy Nelson. Jimmy Nelson's been pitching very well recently. In fact, you look at his last 6 starts, at least 19 DraftKings points in all of them, 22 plus in all but one of those. And in fact, 4 of those last 6, he has not allowed an earned run. So Jimmy Nelson against a Philly team that they have been better after the break, but as Josh pointed out in our other podcast here, still right around a league average team here since the break. So definitely a team that's very beatable. His one weakness is lefties. There's some decent lefties on that side, but Jimmy Nelson, for me, I like him quite a bit at $8,500. Other options, Patrick Corbin, $7,300. This is an Atlanta team that does not hit lefties well. They also don't strike out a lot. So Corbin, an interesting option. We know he's got upside at his price tag there. Chris Bassett's a guy who's been pitching very well recently. His last 2 starts combined, 13 2/3 innings, just 8 hits, 1 earned run, 4 walks to 17 Ks. Facing a Baltimore team who he dominated in Oakland. Obviously a dramatic park shift now going to Camden Yards tonight, but $6,400. Love him in tournaments. He's got some nice upside. And then the other guys you're looking at, you got Justin Verlander against a Houston team that strikes out a ton. Verlander has been pitching well outside of a bad start against Kansas City. He has not allowed more than 1 earned run in 4 of his last 5 starts prior to that. So $7,200 for him against this team that should have a nice high floor. They do have a bunch of big power bats, as we know. This is not a great pitcher spark, but only a 7.5 run total here. So Vegas tends to agree this one's going to stay fairly low scoring. And then if you're looking for cheap guys, there's really nobody that stands out. I'm trying to pick on all these cheap guys. I mean, if you want to take a flyer on John Gray against San Diego in one of your tournaments, if you're making 20, 40, 50 lineups, I don't mind that at $5,200. It's a highly touted prospect. Hasn't been bad in his first 2 starts, but really not a guy that I'm actively targeting here. And outside of that, really nobody that stands out to me. All right, catcher options here. Of course, Derek Norris in Coors Field tonight. He homered last night. You don't love the righty-righty matchup. You prefer him against the lefty. $4,300, kind of pricey for him. You get Buster Posey against the lefty at home for $3,900. I prefer that. Kyle Schwarber, got to mention him, how hot he's been. It is a lefty-lefty matchup, and Jose Quintana is a good pitcher. But Kyle Schwarber certainly in play for GPPs, if nothing else. Other options, you've got, I love Stephen Vogt. In Camden Yards, homered last night, still pretty cheap at $3,600. I like him. John Jaso, though, probably going to be my cash game play at $3,300 at Arlington against Colby Lewis, who struggles with left-handed batters. Outside of that, Jonathan Lucroy, you can look at $3,300. Just keeps letting me down, though, in good matchups. They get Jerome Williams today. Going to be hard-pressed finding a better matchup, so hopefully he pays that off today. But like I said, Jaso probably the guy I'm playing in cash. First base options here. quite a few. Paul Goldschmidt. Mike Foldenwitz's much better against righties than lefties, but as we know, Goldschmidt always in play. I think I prefer guys like Miguel Cabrera, $4,900 against Colin McHugh. Didn't really do anything last night. Did draw one walk, struck out a couple times in his first start back, but as we know, when healthy, one of the best hitters in all of baseball. I like Joey Votto in the lefty-lefty matchup against Brett Anderson. The guy just continues to rake. I mean, he's got a WOBA, or an on-base percentage, north of 550 since the All-Star break, which is absolutely ridiculous. Adam Lynn, probably my favorite cash game play at 4,400 against Jerome Williams. We know the kind of damage he does against righties. Flyball pitcher Matt Shoemaker faces off against Eric Hosmer, who is one of the hotter hitters on the planet right now. Homers in 3 of his last 4 games. I love him. Always tends to go over under-owned, but maybe he gets a little tick in his ownership today since he has been hot recently. Tyler Duffy from Minnesota. We got one of the higher totals of the night here at 9. Don't mind Carlos Santana at $4,100. Your other options, you can play Posey, who I already mentioned at first. Ryan Howard, $3,700 if you're not playing Jimmy Nelson. I mentioned Nelson struggles against lefties, so he's a guy who's certainly in play. I would love to play Lucas Duda against Charlie Morton. If he's in the lineup, he's still day-to-day. Hard to say when he's going to be back, but if he's back, you got to like him. And Victor Martinez, $3,500, still cheap. Now he's got Mickey back, batting right ahead of him. Got to like that as well. Second base options for tonight. There's quite a few. Brian Dozier gets Josh Tomlin, who was not a good pitcher. Hearing reports that he's losing velocity. And, this is just a guy that you would have picked on anyway. Definitely a good target for tonight. D. Gordon, always in play because of his stolen base potential. Actually hit a home run out of the park the other day. And you don't want to pick on John Lackey, but of course D. Gordon always in play because he does have that upside. Justin Verlander does have those reverse splits. Jose Altuve, for that reason, in play here, even though he's slightly better against lefties. Got to like him. Other options, Ben Zobrist at $3,800 against Matt Shoemaker. He's certainly an option tonight. Other cheap guys, Brandon Phillips against Brett Anderson. He's been hitting lefties pretty well recently. I don't mind going with him. A lefty, Daniel Murphy, second base, third base eligible against Charlie Morton. Another one of those guys, much, much better against righties than lefties. If you're looking for some cheap lefties, all your Philly bats here, the 3 that have second base eligibility, Cesar Hernandez, Odubel Herrera, Chase Utley, all those guys in play. If you want to chase the upside, Jed Jerko is much better against lefties than righties, but he does have homers in 2 of his last 3, and he's hitting in Coors Field, so you can go that route if you'd like. Pair of $2,900 cheap guys here. Anthony Rendon against Jake Peavy, Scooter Gennett against Jerome Williams. Both those guys is certainly in play for cash games and tournaments. Rendon has just not been very good, but I tend to think he'll turn around sooner rather than later and become a nice value for a few days at least. Third base options, already mentioned Cabrera, but I absolutely love Nolan Arenado here against Andrew Cashner. Cashner, another guy, significant issues with lefties. Pretty good against righties, but this is Coors Field. Arenado been crushing righties this year. Love him tonight as one of my favorite options from Colorado. Miguel Sano, we know the kind of upside he has. He had a 41-point game the other day, and he gets Josh Tomlin, who I already mentioned I'm looking to pick on. Manny Machado, if you're not going with the Bassett Hound, Chris Bassett, $4,700. Got to like him. Chris Bryant gets a lefty, but a good lefty in Jose Quintana. He's an interesting option. Todd Frazier is ISO against lefties, still $393. Love him at $4,100 tonight. And your other options, if you want a piece of Josh Tomlin for lower ownership, Trevor Plouffe certainly going to fly under the radar. Miguel Sano going to be the popular play from that game. And I'm sorry, at least at third base. Mike Moustakas, some cheap power against flyball pitcher at Shoemaker at $35. I like him. Already mentioned Daniel Murphy down here. As far as really cheap options, Matt Duffy had a huge game off Max Scherzer and Nationals pitching last night. He's only $3,400, so give him a look as well. And if you're paying all the way down, you know where I'm going with this one. I love Lonnie Chisenhall against Tyler Duffy, $2,900. Had himself a great game last night. 3 hits, stolen base. Definitely looking to pick on him on this young pitcher with some Indians bats tonight. Nobody else really cheap that stands out. You don't mind Mark Reynolds if you're stacking St. Louis against Brad Hand, but Brad Hand's only allowed 1 homer this year, and this is a St. Louis team that, as a whole, not good against left-handed pitching, so he's a GPP-only option there. Shortstop options. Carlos Correa is your top option, of course, since Troy Tulowitzki is involved in the early slate there. Other guys to consider, I still like Eugenio Suarez. He's still crushing lefties, $3,300. He's a fine option. Keep talking about how Asdrubal Cabrera has been hot. He's a lefty against Colby Lewis as well. I mean, 9 of his last 10 games, he has multiple hits. 3,600 for him. He's a nice spot. Brandon Crawford, reverse splits guy, hits lefties better than he hits righties. Gets Gio Gonzalez tonight. Gio's been tough on lefties, but he's got some big-time upside. Jung Ho Kang gets John Neese. We know he's been killing lefties. 3,500 for him. John Segura should be leading off against Jerome Williams. $3,300 for him is not a bad option. And then if you're chasing some power upside with those gusty winds in San Francisco, Ian Desmond at $3,200, not a bad option either. Outfield options. Bryce Harper donged last night, and you got to scroll down to find him at $4,700 against Jake Peavy. Love him tonight. But my favorite overall option in the outfield is going to be Carlos Gonzalez. Lefty against Cashner. Cashner's been awful against lefties this year. 388 WOBA allowed, 12 homers. Now he's pitching at Coors Field against one of the hotter lefties on the planet. Gotta love Cargo. He's going to be very popular tonight, I would imagine. His teammate Charlie Blackmon, a $500 discount. Probably a higher floor, lower ceiling than him, though. Matt Kemp and Upton are in play. I don't love their price tags. Not guys I'm going out of my way to play, but certainly will have some exposure. Ryan Braun against Jerome Williams. Let some people down last night, but Jerome Williams is simply not a good pitcher. A guy I'm trying to target where I can. Curtis Granderson's another guy who's been hitting well, $4,100. You get him as a lefty against Charlie Morton, who I mentioned has those issues against lefties. As you're scrolling down a little bit more, I like Dexter Fowler as a tournament option. He's a guy that does it all. $3,900 his last 2 games, 2 doubles, a triple, a homer. I'm not trying to pick on Quintana, but Fowler, one of those guys, should fly under the radar. Can't say enough about Gregory Polanco. Just continues to be very consistent right now. One of the best cash game plays over the past couple of weeks. So his price is creeping up. Still like him there. Aaron Hicks, another one of those guys picking on Tomlin. Scroll down a little bit more. Marlon Byrd has great splits. Another Reds guy, crushes lefties, 3,700. A couple disappointing games in a row, but I mean, you're not playing him to get you 3 hits. You're playing him to search power, try to find the seats at Dodger Stadium. Scroll down a little bit more. Chris Davis, we know his upside against Jerome Williams. You prefer him against a lefty, but Williams pretty equally giving to lefties and righties. Ben Paulson, 3,500, another lefty against Andrew Cashner at Coors. Looking for these cheap Dodger bats against David Holmberg, Yasiel Puig, and Scott Van Slyke. Both those guys in play there, certainly. Other options as we're looking even cheaper. Desmond Jennings at $3,000, just back. Had a nice game last night, and his return, 11 DraftKings points. So I'm looking at him as another low-owned guy. Preston Tucker's down to $3,000 if you're trying to pick on Verlander. He's got massive upside at that price. A couple Tampa Bay lefties you can look at. You got Grady Sizemore there at $2,700. He's not a bad option. Kevin Kiermaier, depending on where those guys are slotted, you're looking at them. Kike Hernandez, I didn't mention him at short, but $2,500. Play him at short or in the outfield. Gotta love him against a lefty. And Johnny Gomes, your last platoon guy against Patrick Corbin. The guy, all he does is mash left-handed pitching. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.